So once again, welcome to the Unshakable Foundation meeting of Cocaine Anonymous. This is a main share meeting, and today it's with great pleasure and lots of gratitude that we welcome Sherri L, who's come to share on the topic of the 12 steps for up to about 40 minutes, after which we'll open up for the Q&A portion of the meeting. And with that, Sherri, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for chairing the meeting. Isaac Young, thank you so much for asking me to be here today. It is an honor and a privilege. Honor means highest respect, and I do have the highest respect for Alcoholics Anonymous, CA, all the programs. And I am Sherri, and I am an alcoholic. I want to first talk about the name of this meeting because, wow, Unshakable Foundation, meaning I have a foundation so deep and so great that no matter what happens, it doesn't shake me back to a drink. And the 12 and 12, in step 12, talks about emotional stability, which means unshakable foundation. Emotional stability is dependence on God. And so I'm going to talk about God today, and I'm going to talk about how I got there. And I want to talk about the steps because I have a disease that centers in my mind. I haven't had a drink. On Saturday, it'll be 23 years, or a drug. And I tell you that because for those who are new here, Seth and Anthony, welcome back. I just want to say that a new clean date, sobriety date is better than a headstone date. I unfortunately know too many with headstone dates. So I'm really glad you're here. I'm glad you're back, and please stay. The 12 and 12 says in the foreword that the steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which if practiced as a way of life, enable the sufferer, me, to become happily and usefully whole. On page 59, the big book says, here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. So in other words, the program is the steps, because after that sentence, the 12 steps are in order. And that is how I like to take a journey through with my experience and how I developed a relationship with my higher power, and also how I live my life today. And I want to say before I even get started, because I'm going to tell you a lot of really cool things, but I want to say before I get started, I'm going to just start at step 12 a little bit. Please note that it says we practice these principles in all our affairs. It doesn't say that we perfect them. It doesn't say that we'll never do them again. It doesn't say that I'm a bad person if I do it again. It just says we practice. And that's why I love Alcoholics Anonymous, because no matter what I do, what I say, how I act, you guys can't kick me out. CA, all of the programs. But you know what I mean. So I'm going to, of course, start with step 1. And I don't really talk about the drinking part a lot because I feel like it's reporting and I'd rather speak from my heart. But I am going to report a couple of things just to maybe qualify. I was a blackout drinker. Every time I drank, I blacked out. I was a puker. I wish there was a more ladylike way to say that, but there's just not. I have been either at a party or at a bar, and I have gotten so drunk that I puke, and then I go back in and I drink some more. And I was a drunk driver. There were days when I had to wake up and open the blinds just a crack to see if my car was still out there, because I didn't know if I drove it home or not. One day my car was stolen. So imagine my disarray in that, looking for the car. And not only is it not there, like it's not anywhere. I couldn't even remember, like, wait, what? Where did I park it? Where did I leave it? Who drove it? All of that. But it turns out it was stolen. And the only way that I actually knew that was because whoever stole the car threw the paperwork out of the car, the registration, thank God, the title. You're not supposed to keep the car title in the car. Anyway, so I was a drunk husband stealer. I was a binge drinker. I spent a lot of my drinking career in pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. I remember lying there after a good drunk, and I remember begging God to make me feel better. I remember feeling very ashamed and guilty and afraid of what had happened the night before. And I would lie there for the day, and I would do all of that, and I would pray and I would beg, and I would say I'd never do it again. And then as soon as I felt better, I got up and went and did it again. And that's my drinking career. It just was over and over and over and over again. And today I want to talk about step one in a way that deals with the alcoholism. Because for me, I don't have a drinking problem today. I have a thinking problem today. I have a disease that centers in my mind. But I want to say this, if you're new or returning, the only difference between myself at 22, almost 23 years and you is one drink or one use, one hit. That's all. That's the only difference between us. I have some experience here, but I still have to treat my alcoholism. When we talk about being recovered, it talks about the hopeless state of mind and body. I am recovered. I'm no longer in a hopeless state of mind and body. My hair is a little messy because it was windy, but that's it. So in step one today, because I don't have a drinking problem, I have a thinking problem. Step one for me today means I'm powerless over not people, places, and things. I'm powerless over my alcoholism, and I'm powerless over what my alcoholism thinks about people, places, and things. And I have to treat that. And the way that I treat that is to realize that I have no power. And all my life, I thought I had power. I was controlling. I was running the show. Didn't think that God would help me. You know, I knew who God was. And it was the type of God that I came here with that was shaming, condemning, and punishing. So my life was very unmanageable, but it didn't look like it because I still went to work. I got there on time. I still, paid my bills. I did all the things I needed to do. It was very hard for me to admit. And then I started coming around, and what I heard you guys say, I couldn't relate to. And then I decided to quiet my judgment. And then I started to hear things that I related to. And I would start to say, instead of saying, I've never done that. I grew up around old timers. These guys are drinking vanilla extract and mouthwash. And I'm thinking, whoa, I do not have a problem, right? I go out and buy the alcohol. And I'm thinking, because I'm superior, right? And I'm definitely not qualified to be in this program, right? That's just my ego. And I don't know what happened because I'm very full of ego and pride. But God softened me. And that's a prayer for me, guys. God, please soften me. Because I came here very hard-hearted and worse, hard-headed. I went through so many sponsors, God bless them all in the beginning, because I didn't want anybody telling me what to do. I was like, I have a mother. Thank you. I'm good. I don't need anybody telling me what to do. So life was very unmanageable, and life can still get unmanageable today. And the reason it gets unmanageable is because I get into my alcoholism, which for me are obsessive thoughts and actions. Step two, it wasn't about believing in a higher power, because I believed in a higher power. And it took me about 16 years to realize that belief is not reliance. Just because I believe in God doesn't mean I rely on God. You see, I never thought that God would have anything to do with me because I had already done so many things wrong that I was already going to hell. I would walk away from smart mouthing my mom, stub my toe, and she would say, see, God is punishing you. That's the God I knew. And then when I was in early sobriety, like 1 or 2 years, someone, beautiful Peggy, who used to run our central office and has passed now, she said to me, you need to get a book. It's called, our 11th step mentions using outside books. So I'm going to go ahead and say the title. She said, get the book and read it. Your God is too small. So I got the book, but I didn't read it. And the reason I didn't read it was because I was so stunned by the thought that I could have a bigger God. I didn't realize that I could have a bigger God. And that opened me up to a whole new world and a whole new relationship with my Creator that I never knew was possible. That God really was good, that God is love, and that included me too, not just you. And so being restored to sanity, I first have to admit that I'm insane. There's a lot of stories in the big book that talk about insanity. I'm doing a big book study actually every week for the Main Purpose group. And today I was kind of catching up to where we are for tonight. And they were talking about the jaywalker and how the jaywalker would like cross the streets when buses and train and cars and all that was coming, and he would get hit every time and he would break something. And isn't it interesting that they didn't lock him up in a hospital to repair his bones and all the damage, but they ended up locking him into an asylum, which what we call now, or I don't know what you guys call it in the UK, but like a psych ward. And just the insanity. And I was locked in a psych ward. I was in a locked down psych ward because I attempted suicide 3 times before I got sober. And finally, on the 3rd time, they put me in a locked psych ward. And I don't really remember too much about it. I just remember that I wasn't unhappy about going. I remember that I was tired and I wanted to rest, so I was okay with going. I was tired because self wears me out. And I had lived life in self for so long. Every time I try to make a decision, or every time I try to make a plan, or every time I try to figure things out, I get exhausted. It's so exhausting. And it's such a beautiful thing to be aware of self, because when sponsees call me and they're just so exhausted from life, I can say, self wears you out. And they're like, oh yeah. And then they turn the belief in God over to reliance on God. And it's really beautiful to watch the relief that comes from that in myself as well, when my sponsor tells me something so simple as, well, Sherri, that's none of your business. It's kind of a kicker, but man, what relief it is in that. Like, I don't have to mind that because it's not my business. See, I'm here to do God's work, but not God's job. And most things in my life, around my life, are none of my business at all. They're none of my business. And that's so freeing. All I want in my life, my relationships, my sobriety, my, work, my home, all of those things that I want. All I want is ease and freedom. Ease and freedom, right? That's what the 12 steps bring me. Step 3 has changed for me over the years. I remember it being whatever. I would just get on my knees and I would just kind of throw my hands up as in a surrender and say, whatever, because I didn't have any idea. And my sponsor at the time said that was sarcastic. So I said it anyway, because remember, I don't listen and I'm hard-headed and hard-hearted. Now step 3 for me is about, and I want to say this about step 3, guys. Step 3 is made a decision. That is correct. For me, it's okay if you have a different opinion or someone does. Step 3 for me is not just about making a decision, because if I make a decision to eat and I order something in a restaurant and they put it in front of me, I'm going to die of starvation because I have to take the next thing. So my new step 3 is actually from an actor who's not one of us, Ed O'Neill. He played in Married with Children. I don't know if you have it over there. He was Al Bundy, and he also played in a show called Modern Family. And I never really watched either show, but I remember seeing him in an interview. And they asked him, and both shows were very successful. They both ran for 10 or 11 years. And so this guy's got like 20 something years of like big success, huge success. And in the interview, he was asked, did you ever know how successful they would be? And he said, I'll be honest. I've never made a plan in my life. I just go along and see what happens. So for me today, that's step 3. I just go along and see what happens. If I have to go to work, of course I go to work. If there's something that, like there's a wedding or something like that, of course there's plans to be made. But honestly, in most things, I just go along and see what happens. Because if I'm working for God, I just have to go along and see what happens. Step 4 for me, guys. I love step 4. I know it's hard for some of you guys to hear that, but man, they were really dark secrets and they were dirty and ugly. And then I came here and you said, no, they're not. I've done that too. And, the inventory for me, what really has been of more recent years has come to the 3rd column, what it affects. Do you know that I've realized that every single thing in my life that happens that upsets me, because see, when I don't get my way, I get upset. I had a sponsor tell me that once, early sobriety again, couple years or whatever. And I was calling him and I was complaining about everybody at work and what they were doing. And he was really big at saying things like, it's not them. And he'd say, well, she's God's kid too. And I'd say, no, she's not. She's the spawn of Satan. And then he would let me just go on and on and on and on. And then he said, well, kid, it sounds to me like you get upset when you don't get your way. Ooh. I had no words for him. I just hung up. I could not even speak of anything. Like literally my mind was blown at this statement because I just was so, now he's not on my side either, but gosh, it's so true, man. It really is. I want my way in everything. And this is why in step 4 in the 3rd column, I have to look at what it affects, because when I'm resentful at someone and whatever they did, but then I get there and what does it affect? The number one thing for me that it affects of recent years more than anything is my ambitions. My ambition is to go to the grocery store, get my things, check out, and get out. If you pull out in front of me on the way, you're messing with my ambitions. If you go to the 10-lane line with 12 items, you're messing with my ambitions. If you are standing in the exit doorway with your huge cart and another person next to you and I can't get out, you're messing with my ambitions. See, an ambition is like a goal. And my goal is always very simple, also very self-centered, also very selfish. And talk about fear for just a minute. I know there's a lot of them that go around, and I will have to say I've probably heard them all. Here's my favorite: fear, F-E-A-R, forgetting everything's all right. Because that's what happens to me. I forget that everything's all right. That's when I get into self-obsession. That's when I have to call someone. I get afraid when I don't get my way, or I get afraid because I'm not going to get my way. That's all self. Manifestations of self is almost everything that I do. Don Major used to say, there are no bad days. There's only selfish days. And I've experienced some bad days, and I know that I was in self, because what about me, and what about this, that, and the other? It's all about me. And so I want to go into sex a little bit. That's where I held the most shame, remorse, regret, pitiful and incomprehensible situations that I put myself into. I want to tell you guys this: I'm completely free of all of that. I'm free of that because I've learned that the things that I was calling myself are not the voice of God. And the things I was calling you were not the voice of God. And so I had to stop looking at myself in a way that God would never look at me. I did a lot of that because I was Judge Judy over here, right? But I was looking at myself in a way that God would never look at me. And then I was looking at you in a way that God would never look at you. And so once I realized that there is no shame in the voice of God. There is no pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. And those are things that I did. They're not who I am. They're not who I want to be. And I do want to mention that when it talks about the sane and sound ideal in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it says that we ask God for the sane and sound ideal. It doesn't say that I create one, because I don't know. God, right? We just said I'm insane. I'm not going to make one up, but I'm going to ask God to show me along the way what's the sane and sound ideal. So I have nothing anymore. I did hold back the one thing. There was one thing that I held back, and I don't think I let it go until about my 3rd or 4th year sober. And when I let it go, I'm going to go into the 5th step with this one, because here's the 5th step for me, guys. When I did my 1st and 2nd and 3rd and 4th and on and on and on and on, because I try to work the steps annually, because I still am unmanageable. I still forget that God's in charge. I still forget that I need to turn things over. I still forget I need to rely on God. And I still get resentments. I still get afraid, and I still have sex BS. You know, anytime there's a relationship, there's always going to be something, right? So all the 5th steps that I've done, what happened for me is I was able to tell somebody all those dark, dirty, ugly things that I thought they were, that I was ashamed of. And do you know that not one face ever moved? Anyone who heard my 5th step, their face did not move. In shock, in surprise, in disgust, their face did not move, which made me know that they were not judging me. And oftentimes they would say, I've done that too, or I can understand why you did that, or I felt like that too. What a beautiful experience. And the one thing that I held on, I was finally able to write it down and give it to someone in a 5th step. And her face didn't move. And it was the most freeing thing, because I was so guilty and so ashamed of it. And yet she still didn't judge me. Step 6 and 7. Step 6, guys, is not my job. It's not my work. There's no work there for me. I know people have different opinions. I am going to share mine. Step 6 says, became entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. So once I get a leg up on what my defects of character are: selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, afraid, controlling, judgmental. I'm sure we can ad infinitum that list, but usually it's all forms of self. Once I get that list of defects, I have to get ready for God to take them. And then what I have to do in step 7 is ask God to take them. I was 18 years sober, and Teresa F. was my sponsor at the time. And in 18 years, I never heard anyone say this is not behavior management, that we give them to God. And I'll tell you why I like to share that. I like to share that because when I screw up, not if, when, it's just me needing to get more ready to have God remove these defects of character. And it's just asking him to do those. And have they been all removed at once? No. But it's a process of time. It's not an overnight matter. And I honestly, when I'm in a situation where I could definitely act in such a way that is not living by spiritual principles, and I've done it. But if I don't, I had a lady one time screaming at me from the 3rd floor balcony because she was cleaning, I guess, and purging, and she was throwing stuff down the balcony 3 floors by the dumpster. So I was walking through there with my dog, and I kicked a box just to get it out of our way. It was an empty box. And we just kept going. And all of a sudden, I hear her screaming at the top of her lungs at me that I did not have to effing do that I could have effing walked around, but the dumpster was in the way, that all these things, all these effing things. And you know what? I didn't say a word. And I walked away and I said, wow, God, you're really impressive, because that's not me. I'm from New York. I'm Italian. I talk with my hands and my dukes are always up, defensive. But it was a box. And then I recalled, how sick must you be to have to scream at me for a box that you're going to put in the dumpster? And then I prayed the sick man prayer for her in the 4-step inventory. I want to go back to that for just a quick second, because I think that sometimes it's tend to be forgotten there. There are prayers in the book. I actually, when I do the inventory with sponsees, I do 4 1/4 columns, because in that quarter column, I put prayers. So after the 3rd column, I put a 1/4 column and it just says horizontally prayers. And I have people do that for a couple of weeks because they have their list of people. And see, if she were in the meeting, she would say, hi, my name's Jane Doe and I'm an alcoholic. And I screamed at someone today over a box, an empty box that I was going to throw in the dumpster because my life is unmanageable and I'm a sick alcoholic and I don't know how to have relationships and I don't know how to talk to people. And there was really no reason for me to say anything. And you know what we would do? We would go and hug her after the meeting. We would say, it's all right. Don't shame yourself. That's not the voice of God. Because we love, comfort, and understand, right? That's what we do for each other. That's in the St. Francis prayer. And I said to my sponsor, I was so elated that I discovered, I was listening to a speaker, one of my favorite speakers, and I was listening to him and I was like, oh, he's got the spirit of forgiveness. Something really bad had happened and he's got the spirit of forgiveness going. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's living the St. Francis prayer. And then I thought to myself, well, gosh, we all are, aren't we? We're love, comfort, and understanding each other, you know, every time we see each other in meetings. Well, then my sponsor now, who's Rena Kay, she said to me, well, Sherri, it's about an attitude. It's about attitude. Do you know how many, in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about attitude a lot. Well, it never once occurred to me to carry the attitude of love, comfort, and understanding to my job. God, I hated them, you know? And so that was really helpful to go into the job with God, because he's my employer, and to go into the job with love, comfort, and understanding, an attitude. And see, even the forgiveness part, it doesn't even say in that prayer, it doesn't say forgiveness. It says the spirit of forgiveness. The spirit of forgiveness is an attitude. It's not just behavior, it's an attitude, it's a perception. So also in 6 and 7, I learn what my defects of character are. I get ready to give them to God. I'm going to give them to God. I get on my knees and I ask God to take them. And believe me when I say I am willing to let them go, because I don't like myself very much. And then I just get shame and guilt and all that again. And what I like to do with sponsees is we have this list of defects of character when we take 6 and 7. So when we do 7 and we humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings, what I also like to do is the spiritual principles. So if I'm being selfish, then I need to be other-centered, right? And if I'm being unkind, then I need to be kind. So instead of having them focus on the defects of character, when people say I'm working on my defects of character, I'm like, yeah, how's that going? I can't do it. I just can't. It has to be God. And that's not an excuse, but I feel like it's true. Like only God has changed me. I've tried to behave in ways that are better, you know, and then I tell my sponsor, oh, it's not behavior management. This is what my sponsor, I was so relieved. I was 18 years sober. I wish somebody would have told me that sooner. And then my sponsor, you know how she goes. Well, Sherri, I want you to behave like they're already gone. She's relentless, right? So I'm like, yeah, okay. So there are some things that I can do. And what I can do and what I ask people I sponsor to do is focus on the spiritual principle. Because if I'm focused on the negative behavior, I'm going to act in the negative behavior. But if I focus on the spiritual principle, when I realize I'm in a conversation with somebody that's getting heated, there's a pause. I'm not good with the pause. I have to ask God for that. God, please help me practice the pause. So I try to practice the spiritual principle of just kindness or listening. My favorite spiritual principle is live and let live, which also means, Sherri, it's none of your business. I have learned along the way that shut up is a spiritual principle, and I need it more often than I would like to tell you. Mind your own business is a spiritual principle. Live and let live is a spiritual principle, because what everybody else is doing is not my business. So on to 8, the list of people I had harmed. There was a lot, some direct amends, some indirect amends. I'm just going to talk about the one that I didn't want to talk about. It was about a job I had when I was young. I was 18 or 19 years old, and it was at an autism school for autistic kids. And I got fired, and I let that go with my sponsor, and of course I couldn't go back and make direct amends. So what she had me do was she had me volunteer at the Autism Society. So I call up the Autism Society all excited. Hey, I would love to volunteer and all these things. And it was way back before you had to do anything online. They're like, oh my gosh, we're having a walk this Saturday for autism. Please come out and you can help there. And I was like, what? This is awesome. God is great. I'm going to get on board. So I go there and I get there and I say to the guy, hey, hi, I'm Sherri. What can I do? And he says, oh, we're pretty good. We're pretty set up. He said, if you want, you can go over to one of the stations and just cheer on the walkers and the runners. And I was like, oh, that's so me. Woohoo. And so I did that. And then at the end, I said, okay, how can I help? What can I do? And he said, we had a lot of regular volunteers come today, so everybody knows, and we're kind of finished. And I'm like, what about set this up or put this away or do this? He's like, yeah, we're good, And so after that, I called them again, and 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 there were just no events. And it occurred to me that is what they talk about when they talk about the grace of God. I didn't have to volunteer for them for the rest of my life, because anything that I've done is not a life sentence. There was a guy on Facebook. I don't know who it was. I was speaking at a meeting and then he Facebook friended me. I remembered at the time, but I don't exactly now. And the little blurb you can put on social media kind of about yourself. And what it said was, made a mess, cleaned it up. I just loved that because it's so simple, right? It really is simple. Made a mess, cleaned it up. So just the willingness to go, just the willingness to make it right. God graced me with something that didn't have to be a life sentence. And I never went back to them again. They never needed any volunteers again when I would call. And then I stopped calling because I realized this is the grace of God. I'm going to move quick because I have some other things to talk about. Step 10, I do the spot check inventory. I'll tell you why, because I cannot stay crazy for long. I visit insanity today, but I do not live there and I do not like it. So I immediately, as soon as something happens or there's a conversation or I get upset about something, I am on the phone. Sponsors, spiritual advisors, sobriety sisters, young, whoever will take my call when I'm crazy, because I don't like crazy anymore. And so I just do the spot check inventory. When I lay down with my soul and my God at night, what I do is I say, it's been a good day, God, thank you. And if something has happened, what I say is, it's been a good day, God. I didn't do so well with that. Please help me next time. Thank you. That's it. That's the 10th step for me. Step 11, I was just apprised of some new knowledge about step 11, which I had not known. A lot of the times for me, step 11 is really just about conscious contact. Sometimes I set the alarm on my phone and it just says God. It's just to remind me that God is there, because I get busy and I get into things and I get on the social media or I'm even working or whatever. And I don't even talk to God for a couple hours. And it's like, whoa, hey, God, what's up? So just a reminder. A lot about conscious contact. So I'm going to go ahead and just add this in real quick. Being almost 23 years at 22 years sober, and I am 55 years old, I have recently found myself homeless. It was a surprise. My dog bit someone in the apartment complex, and I had taken care of the guy he bit. I took him to the ER, fed him, changed his dressing. He had to have stitches, but he lunged at the dog. And anyway, short story, I was given a 3-day notice to get out, and it was 2 days before Christmas, and I don't have anywhere to go. So I packed what I could in my car and my dog, and we just hit the road. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And some of you guys know Scott L. here in Nashville. And when I was early sober, I always say I was raised by Scott, but when I was early sober, Scott said something that I've always hung on to. And he said, you can pretend to care, but you cannot pretend to show up. And I just want to say that I used to whine and cry to the sponsors about that. No one ever shows up for me in AA. I don't have that story. But man, let me tell you, we would be in the car most days if it wasn't for the people in Alcoholics Anonymous showing up and contributing to my 7th tradition, because I'm also quote unquote jobless. I am working 5 different jobs, but it's not a regular gig. And so the money is not as much as it was with a regular gig. I have been out of a regular gig since September, and I don't understand it. And I don't understand the homelessness. But I know that God is still in control. So when it talks about practicing these principles, the principles here are, what I said about step 1, my life can still be unmanageable. I have to treat my alcoholism. And I want to tell you guys that 90% of the time it's been all good, even if we've slept in the car. I remember last Saturday, we slept in the car. I had no idea it was supposed to snow until we woke up to it all over the car. And I didn't wake up and say, oh my God, I can't believe this is my life. I woke up and said, oh my God, this is beautiful. And then I woke up my dog, King, it's snowing outside, because he's an Alaskan huge Malamute puppy and he loves the snow. And so that's the difference. And I've been able to stay in hotel rooms because I've been sponsored by members of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't know what's next, but see, I'll just go along and see what happens, because I really don't know, but it doesn't matter. Because I have an unshakable foundation. And when it does get shooken, I don't know if that's a word, when it gets shook, I called my spiritual advisor the other day, and he said, Sherri, there's only one prayer, right? And I'm like, one? There's like a lot of prayers in that book. He's like, but there's only one, right? If you're living in 10, 11, and 12 and going back when you need to. Step 11 says praying only for the knowledge of his will for me and the power to carry that out. So instead of saying, I'll just go along and see what happens, when I get on my knees every morning, I'm going to be maybe 2 minutes over. I'm wrapping, I promise, guys. When I get on my knees in the morning, and I want to tell you why I get on my knees in the morning, because my sponsor is 49 years sober, and she is also up there in birthday age, which she won't tell us, and I wouldn't say anyway. But when she was speaking at a meeting, she talked about getting on her knees in early sobriety. And I asked her, do you still get on your knees every day and twice a day? And she said, well, sure. No one told me not to. It's not for God. God doesn't care if I'm on my knees. It's for me. It's for me to practice humility and to remind myself that I'm not in charge. Whether I'm unemployed, bankrupt, homeless, whether it's somebody screaming at me, kicking a box, whether it's somebody giving me a 3-day notice to vacate because my dog bit somebody, I'm not in charge. And so when I get on my knees now, since my spiritual advisor told me that, when he said that, I'm getting on my knees now and I'm saying, God, I pray for not only for the knowledge of your will for me and the power to carry that out, not what Sherri wants to carry out, what God's will is for me to be carried out. And so for me, that's really meant a lot over these last few days. Step 12, there's a line on the first page of Working with Others. It's on the last paragraph. It's the first sentence, and it says, "To be helpful is our only aim, period." Note, it doesn't say to be helpful to alcoholics. So when I'm at the grocery store and there's a mom who's got 2 toddlers on each side of her, and she's got a full basket of groceries and the toilet paper is on top and it flies off as she's trying to get to her car, I walk over there and pick it up, because to be helpful is my only aim. And it takes nothing from me, absolutely nothing from me. And I'm grateful for this 12th step because I'm grateful to have a sponsor. I like to be accountable. I like when something happens or what in my mind goes wrong. I like having someone to call and get back to sanity, because one sentence can get me back to sanity. One sentence from you guys could get me back to sanity because I can't think straight. I want to tell you a couple really quick things. Smoking. I actually stopped smoking using the 12 steps. I'm just putting that out there. But sometimes when I'm stressed, and it was a lot of years, and sometimes when I'm stressed, I will smoke a little. And so I'm in this store and I'm buying a pack of like nasty cigarettes because it's all I have the money for, because they're expensive now. I don't know how much they are there, but anyway, and a guy asked me the guy who worked there asked me how I was doing. And I was like, never mind, I said, you don't want to hear about that. And he says, no, I really do. Because there was no one else there. And so we were kind of just chit chatting. In the interim, another customer had come in, and the guy who worked there reaches in his pocket and hands me a handful of change. And he said, this is all I have, but you're welcome to it. And I said, no, thank you, which I shouldn't have done, because for me, receiving and asking for help is the hardest thing I've ever had to learn in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not good at either, because I feel like I owe somebody. I feel like I'm obligated. I was on my own since I was a teenager. And I have always been self-supporting, all the things. And so it's been really hard. And I'm learning over the years how to receive. And so anyway, so we walk out. So myself and the other customer walked outside at the same time. And he took a $10 bill out of his pocket and he said, here's for your next pack of cigarettes. And you know what and I just cried. I had no words. I couldn't even speak. And he said to me, say your prayers. I said, oh, believe me, I have been. That's God reminding me. That's what I call a God wink. About a week later, I was at the grocery store and there was a car pulled up to the curb. I don't know if she was waiting for someone or waiting for groceries to be put in her car or whatever. And her license plate said, be easy, Beazy, be easy. And I pulled over next to her up by the curb and I said, and we rolled our windows down and I said, hey, thank you so much for putting that on your plate, because I really think it's a God wink for me. I said, I'm, unemployed and looking for jobs. And I feel like it's got to be this job, this amount of money, my timing, when it's there, where it is, where I'm going to live with it, all the things. I didn't even say all those things to her, but I said, I try to force control and manipulate things. And I think that's God in the universe telling me to be easy. See, because I have to back up in order to rely. I can believe in God. That doesn't mean I rely on God. So I have to be easy and let God do some work. So I got a call from a sponsee. I parked my car. I was going to go in the grocery store. I was actually working like a delivery thing. And then so I also took a picture of the license plate and I texted it to the sponsee. And I get a tap on the window, and it's the driver of the car, and she's got this big, beautiful bouquet of pink and purple flowers. And I have no words. I'm just bawling because it's God giving me flowers, guys. It's God handing me a bouquet of flowers. I don't even know the last time I got flowers. Listen up to that, guys. Girls like flowers. But I just knew, and I couldn't even speak. And she just kept saying to me, because she saw it. And she said, it's okay. You're good. It's all right. You're good. You're good. And I just mouthed the words, thank you. And then she handed me $100. And then I couldn't speak again. And then she stood there for a couple more minutes. I didn't even tell her my quote unquote situation. I didn't tell her what was going on. And she just felt inspired to do that. And you see, that's the way the God of my understanding works today, because now I have a bigger God. The God I came here with is no longer good enough for me. I heard someone say they call their higher power Gus, G-U-S, Great Universal Spirit. Man, if you got to tell me that the guy who gave me the $10 and her that gave me the 100 and a bouquet of flowers is not a great universal spirit or a loving, kind, beautiful, giving, loving spirit, then I would argue with you all day. 2 days after that, there were 2 kids in a big jacked up truck. I say kids, they were like 20-ish, 20, 25, whatever, 2 guys. And they kind of get next to me at a stoplight, and the one guy rolls his window down that was next to me, and I'm rolling my eyes as I'm rolling my window down, thinking he's going to say something inappropriate to me or mean. And this was about 3 days after I was given the bouquet of flowers and $100. And he said to me, I want you to know that God loves you. And again, the tears just flowed. I couldn't speak. And I finally got the words out. And I said, thank you for saying that. And I do know that. And please keep reminding people. And I want to remind you today that whatever you call the God of your understanding, and if you don't have one at all, borrow mine. But I want to tell you that God loves you and that I love you. And I am so happy and grateful to be here today. Thank you so much.
Addict. Hi, Sherri. Hi, Sherri. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. I always love listening to you. Very quick question. You talked about wearing out self. For our friends who might be newing, or would you like to kind of expand on that a little bit, please? And thank you.
Sure. Self is exactly what I was in when I saw that license plate, because I was trying to, in my mind, first of all, I do a lot of 11-step work. In the morning, I journal, I do a gratitude list, I pray, I meditate. And that morning I didn't, because I thought, I've got to just get out there and get to work and do all these delivery services and make some money. And I'm supposed to hear from that job, and I'm going to follow up with them. And I got a second interview. And so this is self, right? None of this is led by God. None of this is God's will. I'm just trying to figure things out, make things happen, and manipulate things to go my way. Oh, how exhausting, right? And that was just one morning. And then I get to the grocery store, and I didn't sit down and do my journaling or praying or meditating that morning, but God still showed up, because the journaling, the meditating, and the praying and the gratitude list is not for God. It's for me. God doesn't need me to do all that. I do that because I want conscious contact and closeness. Self means I want this guy or that house or that car. Self is me thinking that I know best. And it is exhausting. I had a really hard time with a job, but thank God it saved me, because I was able to meet my current sponsor, because she's very heavy into the traditions, Rena Kay. And she helped me. And you know what? I was in an awful, I call it sobriety, not having a drink, but not being sober at all. It was a disaster. Do you know that in that 3 months that I struggled with that job, I never once invited God to that job? And I didn't even realize it, but I was so exhausted and I was crying all the time. That's what I mean by self wears me out. If I'm in self, I'm worn out. It takes too much energy.
Thank you, Sherri.
Thank you. Thank you, Young, and thank you again for the invite.
Thanks, Sherri, and thank you, Young, for the question. Arkhouse, would you like to come in?
Yes, I can. Yeah, hiya. Sherri, that was a lovely share. I'm just obviously in Arkhouse, coming on with my steps. I'm on to, I've just become house leader, which I'm proud of today. No, it's just a bigger responsibility what I've got, and just obviously thanks to people like you, what just like to me are like living proof that this can be done. Which is what obviously when I first come into Ark, I was like, nothing's going to change me. This was like a last resort thing. But I've got the one and only Young as my counsellor. He's really good. He's helped me a lot. Better understanding about everything. Feels like I'm coming along with steps, but yeah, just thanks for your share, everyone. Nice to hear. And I'm new to the group, so I'll be coming in a lot more because I feel like this helps me, stuff like this. Listening to other people who are on like same wavelength as me, you know what I mean? So yeah, thanks for your share. Having the last speak.
Yeah, Alan Addict, alcoholic. Yeah, I've just been to NA, so I'm sorry I come in halfway through. So what I heard, it was a good share. And thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Really good to see you both. Michael, would you like to come in?
Cheers, Isaac, and thank you very much, Sherri, for your share. So when you were talking about your step 12, and it says like we've got, we'll help, like everyone will help others, not just people in recovery. Like I do that, right? But sometimes my first thought is I really can't be bothered, or I really don't want to do that, which I presume is possibly my ego. So I think my question is, what is the best deflation of ego? What is the best tool to deflate my ego? So like, I'm helping others and I thoroughly enjoy it all the time. Because like most of the time I do, but sometimes I really just think, oh, God's sake, have I got to do that? But I do it, but my first thought isn't pleasant. Yeah. So how do I deflate my ego?
So Scott L. that I was talking about that also lives here says it's just a thought and nobody has to know if you act the way you should, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing for sure. And what my sponsor calls it is sober feet. I don't always have a sober mind, whether I've had anything to drink or, use or whatever today. I don't always have a sober mind, but I can have sober feet. And as long as you're doing the work, because the ego is there. And I want to tell you something. Love is not convenient. I remember I had a friend ask me to pick up a prescription for her, and I didn't want to do it at all. But she was a good friend, and I would have done anything for her. And I went to pick up the prescription, and when I got there, the pharmacy was closed for lunch. So I had to wait there for 20 minutes, and I called her I texted her and I told her that. And she's like, oh, don't worry about it. It's okay. We can get it later. And I said, no, I'll wait. Well, in the 20 minutes, I had turned my car off and my car went dead. Just dead as a doornail. I don't know what happened. I don't know whatever. I couldn't start it. So now they're back from lunch and I'm backing up the drive-through to get the prescription. And these two men get out. It was around Christmas time a couple years ago, like little elves. Nobody even had jumper cables. One went over to the store, bought jumper cables, came back, jumped my car, got it started, and I was able to get the prescription and then go to the auto place to figure out what was going on. And so because I was willing to do something for someone else, even though I didn't want to, God helped me right there with the elves. With the angels, the elves, the things that show up. And I just want to say to remember, please, guys, love is not convenience. When you're doing something for your mother, father, brother, sister, spouse, kids, love is not convenient. As long as we move our feet, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I think about it. What matters is if I do it or not. And then I try to remember my attitude. I try to go into it with the spirit of service, even though I don't want to do it. I try to shift, and this is kind of what your question was. I try to shift the negative thoughts to this is the spirit of service, not to what I have to do or what I should do, but the spirit of service. Thank you. Great question. Thank you. And it takes time. Hi, Ella.
Thank you, Michael. Great question. And lastly, Ella, would you like to come in, please? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Isaac. Good evening, guys. I'm Ella and I'm an addict. Sherri, thank you so much for your share. So my question is, how has practicing self-compassion helped you to set boundaries throughout your recovery, and how has this changed as you've gone through your journey? Thank you.
We talk a lot about like self-help and self-confidence and self-esteem and self-worth. and self-compassion and all those things. We talk about those things a lot today, but I want to tell you, I don't do that. I don't want anything to do with self. See, because that's all me just trying to fix it or make boundaries or set boundaries or have self-esteem or think high of myself or all those things. I don't want anything to do with self. What I have today is God esteem. What I have today is Godfidence. Because let me be clear, and I don't care if any of you think this is coming from my ego, but I'm telling you straight up and down, I know who I am in God. I know my value. I know my worth. I know my spirit of helpfulness, and I know who I want to be. And God is good with that. And I have Godfidence when I walk into a room. And if you're trying to figure out a relationship, invite God. Ask God. Ask God to decide, if I'm in an indecision, God decide for me. God, please show me what to do about this. God, please show me. God, please help me with this. God, I pray only for the knowledge of your will for me and the power to carry that out. Thank you for the question. I'll talk more after if you want, and give phone number too.